Hello again, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us on this Saturday, for Saturday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm David Percy. Up first, we've got on the hazardous weather graphics, there are no watches, warnings, or advisories out anywhere around the state. Been a while since I've said that. And so looking good. We do have low pressure in the Gulf of Alaska. Front well into Canada, the main frontal boundary with that, and another trough developing and moving into the panhandle, bringing some rain, gusty winds along with it as the low center slowly tracks eastward in toward the north coast, and it'll start to take a southeastward track a little bit, or east-southeast, and move across the panhandle later tonight and into the day Sunday as it clears out over south central Alaska and the southeast interior. That's pretty slow going though. And then out to the west, wound up storm out there just north of Shimianatu Island, and a frontal boundary bringing some clouds into the central Aleutians, and moisture poised to move up, at least mid and high level clouds to the Pribilofs here later this evening. But not looking for a whole lot of precip with that. Mostly clear over the northern Bering Sea, and a lot of clearing over the central northern interior. Temperatures northwestern valleys staying in the minus 30s to near minus 40 in the mid-afternoon today, into the Yukon Flats, Beaver, for example, 35 below for current temperature at 3 p.m. And on the chart, there's that low center in the Gulf of Alaska, and kind of another front developing and moving inland that brought some fair amounts of rain the last 12 hours to areas of the southeast coast. Heaviest in the south. Ketchikan, last 12 hours, ending at 3 p.m. this afternoon, picked up 0.8 of an inch of rain, while Petersburg had 0.7 of an inch. West of Petersburg at Sitka, they picked about half an inch, and then just 1/4 of an inch at Juneau. But heavier precipitation, about 1 1/4 inches water equivalent, falling at Yakutat as the rain changed the snow this afternoon. Kind of a wet snow, temperatures falling down to near freezing there. And that was the heaviest rainfall amount around in the state today. And then probably maybe 1/4 to a half inch falling over the western Aleutians with that system out there. Otherwise, pretty light amounts, traces to maybe 1/10 of an inch of snow, 1/4 of an inch possibly falling areas of the Arctic coast into the North Slope. But basically dry and cold over the central interior, especially along the Yukon River Valley areas and out to the Kobuk and Koyukuk valleys, quite cold temperatures. And for tonight, that's going to continue. Lows anywhere from 25 to 45 below zero. Some areas may be approaching 50 below in the interior valleys. A little milder along the Arctic coast with more clouds and kind of getting clipped with a weak trough there on the east side. A little bit breezier as well. And rain changes to kind of an occasional light rain or showery condition over the panhandle as that low center slowly weakens and tracks eastwards, taking a little more of a southeasterly track later tonight into tomorrow. Now, front really weakens right across central Aleutians with periods of light rain there, winds coming down. Even the western Aleutians, that low center pulling back to the northwest and weakening, so much lighter winds coming in. A little breezier, though, for the Fox Islands, maybe a few showers there for especially Unimak Island. And for Kodiak, clearing out, already has cleared out, winds gusting upwards of 40 miles an hour out of the northwest today. And those 40 to 45 mile an hour winds along the southeast coast coming down currently will continue to drop off tonight, and not much in the way of wind tomorrow there over the panhandle. Otherwise, maybe some gusty winds through the passes of the Alaska Range, eastern Alaska Range, Copper River Basin into the North Gulf Coast, but nothing really strong at all expected. And some flurries and fog, low clouds, eastern Arctic coast, maybe locally into the North Slope, and windy, wet conditions over the Aleutians there with that low center just south of Adak or actually Atka Island, and that front bringing some moisture into the Alaska Peninsula. Chance of snow reaches the Pribilof Islands, with the northern Bering Sea staying cold and clear, with that condition all the way into the interior under Arctic high pressure. That holds into Monday as well. Another trough brings some light snow to the eastern Arctic coastal areas, maybe the eastern North Slope, but staying well north of probably Arctic Village. South of the mountains, though, clear and cold, mostly clear, with temperatures below zero throughout much of the interior throughout the entire day on Monday. And again, clear and cold, south central Alaska. Look for an increasing cloud condition possibly late in the afternoon. I'll probably hold off until late Monday night or into Tuesday. See some increase in the clouds along the North Gulf Coast. Otherwise, chance of snow showers, southern panhandle. Rain and snow likely for the Alaska Peninsula with gusty southeast winds. And increasing chances of snow along the southwest coast, along with some increasing wind conditions there as well. On the outer coastline, mostly from Kuskokwim Bay on up, hitting Nunivak Island the hardest there, and northern Bering Sea. Winds on the increase are St. Lawrence Island into the Bering Strait, but lighter winds, some scattered showers, Adak and Atka, maybe some sunshine with light winds over the western Aleutians. Periods of rain for the Fox Islands, but wind's not much of a factor there. And looking at lows tonight, anywhere from 25 to 45 below, coldest over the upper Yukon Valley areas, and probably the Kobuk-Koyukuk valleys once again. 25 to 30 below from the northern Kuskokwim Valley, King Salmon and Bristol Bay, looking at lows 5 to 10 below, and about 5 to 10 below also for the Yukon Kuskokwim Delta, upper teens for the Pribilofs, and lower 30s, lower to mid 30s for the Aleutians, teens and lower 20s for the Alaska Peninsula, mostly in the mid-teens though, and lower 20s Kodiak Island, 5 to 15 for the lows, south central Alaska, some areas to sit in the valley around Will, dropping into near zero. Same thing for Butte and into East Anchorage, Eagle River. Definitely below zero in the Copper River Basin. Upper 20s to the lows in the northern Panhandle to lower to mid 30s to the south. Highs near 40s still for, say, Sitka, Port Alexander, Mount Edgecombe there along the southeast coast. Otherwise colder to the north. A little above zero, Copper River Basin. Highs in the teens. South central Alaska. Mid 20s down toward Homer and Seward. Lower 30s, Kodiak Island.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
On to flying weather for Sunday morning. IFR, Central Eastern Arctic Coast. Marginal VFR down to the crest of the Brooks Range. South of the mountains there, good VFR. Just about all the interior, some marginal VFR, Prince William Sound. North Gulf Coast up into the Copper River Basin. Some of that getting north of the Eastern Alaska Range into possibly Northway and Tok. Marginal VFR for the Panhandle. And good VFR, eastern and northern Bering Sea, band of IFR into the Adak-Atka area with marginal VFR for the Fox Islands. And then for the afternoon, we've got IFR, eastern Arctic coast, North Slope, and marginal VFR north of the Brooks Range for the western areas there. But good VFR, all of the remainder of interior Alaska south of the Brooks Range. Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island, North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, and breaking out to VFR there over the northern Panhandle. Some IFR down over the southern areas lingering. And then looks like IFR southern coast or Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians, and really socked in there for Adak and Atka. Marginal VFR edging northward across the Pribilof Islands, but northern Bering Sea, VFR. And for Monday, moisture continues to push northward there in the Bering Sea. IFR moving across with a frontal boundary across the Pribilofs, marginal VFR to St. Matthew Island, but staying VFR, northern Bering Sea, into the Chukchi Sea. Interior Alaska looking good, good VFR conditions, some IFR, central eastern Arctic coast, and then marginal VFR over the northern three quarters of the Panhandle, and big area of IFR over the south central Bering Sea, but VFR for Shimianga too. Monday afternoon, band of IFR out over the Bering Sea there, catching western Nunivak Island, east of the Pribilofs, just north of St. Matthew Island, expanding as it heads southeastward toward the Fox Islands and across the Alaska Peninsula. Marginal VFR on Chitka Island to Atka, VFR west of there. VFR south of the Brooks Range again, interior Alaska, a couple of really good days coming up over interior Alaska into the North Gulf Coast. Northern Panhandle now, VFR, marginal VFR central and southern southeast coastal areas at Dixon Entrance. Anatuvik and Anigan, both VFR tomorrow, looking good for the Brooks Range, especially southern entrances. Possible marginal VFR north side of both, but probably VFR. And for Lake Clark and Merrill, definitely VFR in the afternoon Sunday, either approach, rainy, VFR, windy VFR, looking good for all of the Alaska Range, actually, interior Alaska. And Mentesta, VFR. Tanita, VFR. Portage could be occasionally marginal at times, especially in the morning hours. Otherwise, not too bad. VFR at other times. And for Chilkoot and White, IFR gradually improving in the afternoon. Freezing levels 2,000 feet southern or up to about the Alaska Peninsula across the Fox Islands to Atka. But freezing levels south of the Panhandle, that cold upper trough swinging in, and then at the surface, south of Kodiak and the Alaska Peninsula, icing. Some mixed icing threats there for the Panhandle, especially the farther south you go toward Dixon Entrance, and lesser threats as you head north, none over interior Alaska, and possible considerable moderate rime icing, Atka over toward Unmak Island, but nothing too terribly serious anywhere else. Jet stream, upper level high, 33,000 feet there just south of Nunivak Island. A couple upper lows south of the Aleutian. Southerly flow, 70 knots, west central Aleutians, western Bering Sea up to 65 to 90 knots. And then cooler northwest breeze, 75 knots there right across the interior. And for 9,000 feet, southerly 60 to 65 knots across the Fox Islands, southeast up to 55 over the northwestern Bering. Relatively light and northerly over interior Alaska, and not much in the way of wind over the Panhandle with the upper low right over the islands there. 40 knotters out of the west there, but that's west of Dixon Entrance at 3,000 feet. Light winds interior Alaska, but 70 knot winds from the south and southeast, 3,000 feet. So pretty good wind with that system just southwest of Nikolsky. Turbulence-wise, some light to isolated moderate chop, enough westerly wind there keeps it occasionally bumpy there for the eastern Arctic coast. And also some mechanical turbulence with the gradients build up along the mountainous terrain of southern Alaska there, the Alaska Range, Copper River Basin, Wrangell Mountains, possibly the northern Link Canal, and moderate turbulence pretty likely for the Alaska Peninsula, Fox Islands to about Atka. After the break, I'll be back with the marine forecasts.
You guys got everything tied down back there?
Yeah.
Yep. We're going through the lee of St. Elias, so there might be some turbulence.
Fasten seatbelt sign on.
Well, who am I to tell you what to do?
There are tens of thousands of glaciers in Alaska. Some stunning cliffhangers, others wide glaciers that come down to meet the ocean tides. Some, like this one we flew over in August, are easily visible from low Earth orbit and are mesmerizing from 1,000 feet above, and have trees growing on top of their soil-laden boundaries. Those glaciers, although they represent only a fraction of the world's ice, are contributing much more than their share to sea level rise. Chris Larson and his colleagues have repeatedly measured 220 of them in a small single-engine otter, measuring their height with lasers and their depth with radar, and watching them change from season to season and year to year. But Alaskan glaciers are also different. We're only just figuring out how they all behave. Data from flights like these, part of NASA's Operation Icebridge, can help fill the gaps. Chris and radar specialist Martine Trufer are both from the University of Alaska Fairbanks and both seasoned Alaskan pilots. But they rely on their good friend and legendary bush pilot Paul Kloss and his 35,000 hours in the cockpit to fly the incredibly demanding flight lines the mission requires. And does it help you guys being pilots too?
I would like to think so, but watching Paul fly and seeing what he does, it's kind of like trying to learn quantum mechanics in kindergarten.
You know, I can fly my airplane around, but just seeing what Paul does in this extremely challenging environment in the mountains while trying to follow a specific flight line at a specific altitude above ground, negotiating winds, topography, maybe occasional low-level clouds that you have to get around, and just managing all that is just several levels above what I could do as a pilot.
Well, I think the first time I came here to this park, I was probably 4 years old with my father. I've been blessed to be able to fly in lots of places in the world, all over the place actually, almost every continent. I guess I'm always looking for some place that might be better than this, but I haven't found it.
Paul's plane is about 60 years old and is the first single-engine otter ever retrofitted with a 1,000 horsepower engine, which makes takeoffs feel effortless and gives Paul the ability to negotiate wild terrain, which he certainly did during the first 2 incredible science flights of this campaign. And with sunny skies and relatively calm air, we covered 3 vastly different pieces of ice. While Paul fueled up the plane, Chris gave us a preview of the day's science and scenery.
So it has one of the greatest coastal reliefs anywhere in the world. So it's between the ocean and the summit of Mount St. Elias, which is 18,008 feet high. It's less than 10 miles. There's a stupendous amount of mountain right off the ocean. It's hard to beat it anywhere in the world. It might be the prettiest for me. It's absolutely stunning. From here in McCarthy, we'll cross one of the bigger precipitation gradients in Alaska too. Here it's about 10 inches of precipitation a year, and we'll go over to an area where it's on the order of 200 inches per year. So it's from one of the driest parts of Alaska to one of the wettest parts of Alaska in about 45 minutes flight time.
Oh, that's pretty good.
That's awesome. You want to do Tyndall next?
Sure, where you want?
If the winds are calm now, might as well grab it.
First, we came to the rugged landscape of Icy Bay, which not that long ago wasn't a bay at all. It was filled with ice. Tidewater glaciers in this region can make dramatic advances and retreats as they feed on high rates of snowfall and then retreat as they're melted by warm ocean waters. Like the Tyndall Glacier seen here, most of these glaciers have retreated dramatically over the last 100 years. But nearby Yahtzee Glacier, after years of retreat, is currently the most rapidly advancing glacier in Alaska. Overall, though, the Icebridge Alaska surveys, from the Denali region in the north to the Juneau ice field in the southeast, have documented pretty substantial thinning of glacial ice. Areas seen here in orange and red show between about 10 and 15 feet of thinning per year.
There's a nice waterfall up there from the hanging ice.
When we very first started profiling this, Paul, this gravel fan and the one in the valley next to it didn't exist.
I was going to say, look at all the good landing spots here.
Yeah,
There's no place to land here before.
no, it was deep water.
After covering several of Icy Bay's glaciers, given that it was time for lunch, just like that, we landed in this unforgettable spot. Flying eastward, leaving Icy Bay behind, we came to the mighty Malaspina, one of the Earth's great examples of a Piedmont glacier that spills out like pancake batter onto a broad plain as it approaches the sea. It surges at uneven intervals, creating dramatic patterns on its surface as it distorts the moraines of rock and soil borne along by the glacier. The Malaspina is less dynamic than the Yahtzee and is only melting at about the average rate for Alaska, but that could change quickly.
It has the potential for being one of the bigger geographic evolutions in Alaska. Certainly my son will be able to witness some big geography changes there. There's potential for it being connected with the ocean through some narrow lagoons, estuaries, which would take a little bit of coastal erosion, but it's not too hard to imagine that where the Malaspina Glacier is now could become a large bay.
The data that Martine's radar provides could reveal how vulnerable the Malaspina is to melting by the nearby ocean. Here we see the radar returns from the surface of the glacier, and here is something that Chris's lasers can't see, the rocky bed of the glacier, giving us both clues as to what's happening under the ice, as well as a measurement of its thickness. Finally, we came to the Yakutat ice field, 300 square miles of absolutely doomed ice perched high in the mountains. Researchers even debate how this ice field came to be at all, since in its current configuration, it's hard to imagine how it could capture enough snow to form glacial ice. And so, even if the Arctic weren't warming faster than the rest of the planet, this area would be likely to melt within a century or two. But with many other glaciers, it's easier to see the connection between a warming planet and ice loss. Thanks to data from IceBridge and other surveys, we now have a good estimate of the current rate of loss from Alaskan glaciers, 75 gigatons a year. While airborne observations over Alaskan glaciers have provided a rich record of change in the area, those efforts are now augmented by NASA's newest ice measuring tool, ICESat-2. With 6 laser beams of its own, and orbiting the Earth every 90 minutes, the satellite will carry on the record of Alaskan change. For their part, Chris and his team will continue to do their surveys for at least the next 2 years, helping to validate the ICESat-2 data and make further detailed observations over the stunning glaciers of Alaska.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Coastal water forecast. Small craft advisories on the south coast of the Panhandle outer coastline. North to west winds 25 knots, and the north coast east winds 25 knots. Lincoln Glacier Bay small craft advisories. Northwest winds at 30 knots with 6-foot seas. Stevens Passage northerlies at 15 knots, and then southeast winds at 20 knots for Clarence Strait, seas at about 6 feet. And moving on to the outlook for Monday. We've got lighter winds along the south coast for Prince of Wales Island along the outer coastline there. Northwest at 15. Central coast, easterlies 10 to 20 knots, seas around 8 feet. And the north coast, small craft advisories, east winds 25 knots. Lincoln Glacier Bay, northern inner channels, there's a gale warning out for north to northwest winds, 35 knots, 7-foot seas, small craft advisories for Stevens Passage, where winds will be north at 25 knots and seas at about 5 feet. Lighter winds in the forecast for Clarence Strait out of the north at 10 knots. Prince William Sound, north winds 15 knots, seas at about 3 feet. Western North Gulf Coast, northwesterlies 15 knots, north 15 for the eastern North Gulf Coast. Barren Islands, Kamishak Bay, small craft advisories, northwest winds 30 knots, seas just under 10 feet. And north to northeast breeze for Cook Inlet, 10 to 15 knots. Those pick up, though, on Monday, especially south of the Forelands and Cook Inlet. Small craft advisories, northeast 30 knots, 8-foot seas. Gale force winds for Kamishak Bay, northeast 40 knots. And the Barren Islands, same thing, gale warnings, east winds 40 knots and 10-foot seas for the North Gulf Coast. Small craft advisories, east winds 30 knots, seas a little under 10 feet. And Prince William Sound, northeast wind 20 knots, seas 4 feet. And for Kodiak Island, west northwest winds 25 knots for the day Sunday, 6 to 8-foot seas. And small craft advisories for the Alaska Peninsula, winds out of the east 30 knots on both sides of the peninsula with seas around 8 feet. Bristol Bay northeast winds at 20 knots. And for Monday, gale warnings for Shelikof Strait, east winds 40 knots or east northeast winds, and seas at about 12 feet. Small craft advisories east side of Kodiak Island for easterlies at 30 knots and seas at 12 feet. Back into the gales, southeast 40 knots from Sitkanak to Castle Cape. And the Alaska Peninsula, gale warnings also east-southeast 35 to 40 knots, and for Bristol Bay, east winds at 40 knots. For the eastern Aleutians, pretty good winds tomorrow. East 45 to 50 knots, seas 12 to 32 feet. Akwx, northeast winds 45 knots, 18 to 21 foot seas. And from Chitka Island, gale warnings, north winds 35 knots, small craft advisories from Kiska to Shemya, looking at northwest winds at 25 knots, seas at about 10 feet. And for Monday, Shemya to Kiska, west winds 30 knots, gale warnings from Chitka Island, southwest 35 knots, small craft advisories, Akwx, southwest 30 knot winds in the forecast there, 14 to 18 foot seas. And for the Fox Islands, small craft advisories for south to southwest winds, 25 to 30 knots, seas running 11 to 17 feet. Southwest coast, northeast winds 20 knots. Gale warnings for the Pribilofs, east winds 35 knots, strongest winds for St. George Island, and seas at about 11 feet. Small craft advisories for the St. Matthew Island area, northeast to 25 knots, seas 10 feet. And 15 knot winds for both St. Lawrence Island and Norton Sound at about from the northeast. And northeast winds pick up. Brisk wind advisories, Norton Sound and Yukon Delta Coast, as well as St. Lawrence Island. Northeast winds 25 to 30 knots. Good gales, though, along the Kuskokwim Delta Coast, south of Nunivak Island, on over to St. Matthew Island. East 45 knots. And the Pribilofs gale warnings, east winds 40 knots, seas building to 16 feet. And for the Arctic coast, brisk wind advisory on the east side there, west winds 30 knots, falling back to 15 knots on the central coast, even lighter on the west side, more variable, 10 knot winds all the way down to Wales. And for Monday, northeast winds 15 knots from Wales to Cape Beaufort, central and western Arctic coast, light west winds at 10 knots, and then 15 to 20 knot westerly winds for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. And for tonight again, clearer and colder over interior Alaska, or staying cold up over the central and northern interior. Colder, though, for the clearing areas of south central Alaska, east and south of the Alaska Range. Rain and snow showers for the Panhandle. Weakening front brings some rain into the central Aleutians. And for tomorrow, clear and cold, dry basically, except for some flurries on the north slope. And for Monday, a front brings some snow to the south.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.